Hey, what's going on? Sir Blackson97 here, back with another deck profile. Today, we'll be profiling the heavily requested and long-awaited and long overdue Gate Guardian deck profile from Maze of Memories. This is one of those kind of similar to Rescue Ace where I wasn't intending on building it, but after collecting a good amount of the cards, it was kind of like, yeah, sure, we'll get a few more cards and kind of build it out and see what we can do, but it's actually a lot of fun. I really like this sort of style and approach of taking old cards or archetypes and kind of revitalizing and revisiting them with a more streamlined and swarm-based style of play. Just kind of get out your Gate Guardian pieces, go into some fusions, flow into other stuff. Plus, I just like the new art and retrains they did for a lot of stuff like Wall Shadow, all the Gate Guardian pieces. Even Gate Guardian himself is now a big old fusion, so it's fun that we're able to take sort of old cards and give them new life. So, without further ado, let's see what these new Guardians are up to. Starting with 3 copies of Thunder and Wind. So big thing to note of all the Gate Guardian fusions is basically you just need to banish their materials. This one in case is Song of the Thunder and Kazajan. And then when they leave the field, because an opponent's card, you get to float into typically a Gate Guardian card. Most of the 2-piece fusions will float into their materials, one of them. Or the big Gate Guardian monster will float into a Gate Guardian card from deck or extra deck. So, a lot of splashability and variety. Like, you can actually run just the classic Gate Guardian and then just dispense him onto the field to probably slam into another monster. But, aside from the banishing to special summon, which the deck does help you streamline through that, so don't worry, you don't have to tribute summon everything. You can just place them out onto the field, kind of like a Crystal Beast, where they typically go into the spell and trap zone. But we'll jump into Of Thunder and Wind special effect, which during your main phase, get to add a spell or trap from deck to hand that lists the 3 Gate Guardian pieces, Song of the Thunder, Kazajan, and Suijin. This is a hard once per turn, but some of the other fusions can actually use their effects multiple times. Such as the one people definitely want to max out on or run multiple copies of Water and Wind, or of Wind and Water. Requires Kazajan and Suijin, and once per chain. When your opponent activates a spell or trap effect on the field, you get to negate that effect. You can actually use this twice per turn, which is pretty cool. That one makes it kind of fearsome, is that it's only once per chain and then twice per turn. So you can really pop off and take care of some spells and traps that your opponent's really trying to use. And then it floats back into one of its pieces when it leaves the field to your opponent. Up next, we have 3 copies of Water and Thunder. Requires Suijin and Song of the Thunder. Similar to of Wind and Water, Once per chain, target a face-up monster your opponent controls, change the attack to 0. This is an effect you can use twice per turn, and then float into your Suijin or Song of the Thunder. Personally, my favorite is Of Thunder and Wind, just because their field spell that you typically want to search is actually just a soft once per turn. So if you can really get multiple copies of their field spell going, you can get a lot of Guardian pieces floating around. That's probably the one I would encourage also running more copies of, just so you can get the most out of searching your field spell, getting more pieces out, and getting more fusions. But if you just want to turbo into the big guy, we're also running 3 copies of Gate Guardians combined. Requires Song of the Thunder, Kazajan, and Suijin. You'll banish to summon it. When your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a card or cards you control, quick effect, negate, and destroy. You can use this effect of Gate Guardians combined up to thrice per turn. Not too many cards say thrice that often, but yeah, just as long as it's targeting, you can negate and destroy. And then when it leaves the field because of the opponent's card, this is the one that floats into a level 11 or lower Gate Guardian monster from deck or extra deck. So base Gate Guardian is the level 11. This one is made 12, so you can't just float into another copy of it. It does ignore summoning conditions, so don't worry. Your Gate Guardian or any of your other fusions can safely just get dumped onto the field and proceed to make plays from there. And then finally, to round out our extra deck, it's technically not a Gate Guardian card, but it is a Guardian card, and it did come out in Maze of Memories, or at least a reprint did. So we're going to include Guardian Chimera. Requires 3 monsters with different names. Must be fusion summoned using only fusion materials from hand or field, with at least 1 from each. If it's fusion summoned by a spell card or effect, get to draw cards equal to the number of materials used from hand, and destroy cards your opponent controls equal to the number of on-field materials, which is pretty cool. restock your hand, clear out your field. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, while Polymerization is in your graveyard, your opponent cannot target this card with card effects. By the way, you should probably be running Polymerization just for Guardian Chimera. These guys, you don't need Polymerization, just banish from the field, it's fine. But yeah, if you have Polymerization in your graveyard, you can't target the Guardian Chimera. Pretty terrifying. It's more of an alternate boss monster and also Pot of Extravagance target, so it's purely there just to get banished so we can draw their cards, but also it's pretty good boss monster. I don't summon it too often, but it does come in handy with not being able to be targeted and just clearing the field or restocking my hand. Moving on to our main deck now, we're going to cover the Guardian pieces themselves. Pretty much 2 to 3 of each is recommended. I usually go with just 2, as we're also running a hero engine to kind of substitute 2 Song of the Thunder, 2 Kazujin, and 2 Suijin. They all have the same effect, but you typically won't go into it 9 times out of 10, but still, in case that 1 out of 10 times, or you really want to know, we'll go ahead and cover it. Once, while face on the field, during damage calculation in your opponent's turn, if this card is being attacked, quick effect, target the attacking monster, make its attack 0 during damage calculation only. So if your opponent wants to swing into a Guardian piece, turn their attack to 0. You can only do it once, but it's kind of funny. It pretty much means you can secure a quick victory, but just 1 battle. Typically, they'll go into the spell and trap zone, kind of like Crystal Beast. That's just the nature of a lot of their Guardian support, is now just going to put them into the spell and trap zone. But if you do manage to get them out on the field with something like Fusion Deployment, or you have a Monster Reborn and one's in the graveyard, you can still do some work with it. They are level 7s as well, along with this next card, so if you want to include some rank 7s by chance, by all means, feel free to do so. Just remember, if you use Fusion Deployment, you're locked into fusions for the rest of the turn. Up next, we have 3 copies of one of my favorite old school fusions that got retrained. Labyrinth Heavy Tank. It's a normal summon without tributing, but it can't attack the turn it's normal summoned, regardless of tributes or not. During your main phase, place a Gate Guardian piece into your spell and trap zone as a continuous spell. And if you control a Labyrinth Wall card, not the original vanilla, you can if you want, but there are plenty of other cards that say Labyrinth Wall that you don't need to rely on the original normal. Just a full disclosure. But if you do have it upon activation, you get to destroy a monster your opponent controls. Along with the field spell, this is what you invest your normal summon in. You just activate your field spell, place a Guardian piece, normal summon your tank, place another Guardian piece, go into a fusion. If you are going to use up your normal summon, you're using it on the Heavy Tank. Up next, we have 3 copies of the retrain of Shadow Ghoul. That's Shadow Ghoul of the Labyrinth. You get to discard it to add a Labyrinth Wall card. Again, don't have to go with the normal vanilla. There is Gate Guardian spells and traps, so don't worry. You don't have to run a random normal monster. Get to discard it to add a Labyrinth Wall card from deck to hand. At the start of the damage step, if your opponent monster battles while you control a Labyrinth Wall card, banish it from this card from the graveyard to destroy that opponent's monster. Yeah, some of these Labyrinth Wall cards have weird, like, hey, during the battle phase for your opponent, just screw with their stuff. So if your opponent really wants to attack through and you've already used, like, your Song of Thunder effect, just banish your Shadow Ghoul and pop their stuff. Just make sure you have a Labyrinth Wall card, which they're pretty much 9 times out of 10 is going to be their field spell. But if you are running Ancient Rules and you really just want to put that Labyrinth Wall out there, by all means. Up next, we're going to be running a little bit of a hero engine. 3 copies of Prisma, just to help out with copying our names and just getting into those cards sooner. And then also cutting into the spell and traps a bit early, we have 2 copies of A Hero Lives. We'll start with Prisma. Once per turn, reveal a fusion monster from your extra deck. Send one of those listed fusion materials specifically named on it from deck to graveyard for that card, and then this card copies that sent monster's name. So, reveal any of your Guardian fusions, even like something big as Gate Guardians combined. Send like something, your Guardian pieces, Song of the Thunder, Kazujin, Suijin, and whenever you send, Prisma will copy that card's name, just so you can go into your fusions. The only downside is a lot of the Gate Guardian support only recovers from like hand deck, or even sometimes from the banish zone. It doesn't really interact with the graveyard too often, so keep that in mind. Stuff like Monster Reborn or just shuffling back into the deck with like Pot of Avarice. If you do have too many monsters in the grave, that is something to take note of. Moving on to Hero Lives. If you control no face-up monsters, pay half your life points to special summon a level 4 or lower elemental hero from your deck. This is a great opening play. Activate Hero Lives. Get a Prisma out on the field, send a fusion material, start copying names, and again, saving your normal summon for the heavy tank. If you're really in a pinch and need to use your normal summon, you can also use it on Prisma, but heavy tank and Prisma are pretty much what you're going to be normal summoning for the most part. Moving on to the spells and traps officially now, we have 3 copies of their field spell, Labyrinth Wall Shadow. So this is why you don't want to run the regular normal. You can if you want, but you definitely want to max out on this. Monsters can't attack the turn they are summoned, except monsters whose original level is 5 or higher. Once per turn, soft once per turn, so again, if you have multiple copies in hand, keep activating, and you can do this. During your main phase, place one of your Sang of the Thunder, Kazagen, or Suijin that is banished or in your hand or deck face up into the spell and trap zone as a continuous spell. At the start of your opponent's battle phase, also target a monster they control with less than 1600 attack, destroy it. I think the second effect of destroying that less than 1600, so the original Wall Shadow had 1600 attack because it was like a combination of Shadow Ghoul and Labyrinth Wall. So that's what I'm assuming is that reference to the 1600, but for the most part, you're utilizing this along with stuff like terraforming and metaverse. Just getting as many copies of this out as possible. Just keep activating them, placing your Guardian pieces, and then going into your fusions. Up next, we have Double Attack, Wind and Thunder, with 2 exclamation points at the end. That's how serious of a card it is. If you control a Gate Guardian monster, target a card on the field and destroy it. During your main phase, banish this from the graveyard to add one of your Sang of the Thunder, Kazagen, or Suijin that is banished or in your deck to your hand. You can use both effects per turn, which is pretty cool. It's also a quick play spell, so you get a little bit of interruption during your opponent's turn, but I just like going into a fusion, activating this, banishing it, and then recovering my pieces for more plays. Definitely one you want to max out on as well. Up next, this one you could probably run just 1 copy of, but I like the original YuGiOh, so that's why I'm maxing out on it. This is YuGiOh Guardian. See, it almost looks like the original. I feel bad for that poor soul getting drained in the front. I don't think he's... Since the original YuGiOh, I don't think he's been having a good time. If your life points are lower than your opponent's, target a monster you control with Gate Guardian in its original name. Have your opponent's life points, then that monster gains attack equal to your opponent's current life points. Get to banish it from the graveyard to similar to Double Attack, Wind and Thunder. Add a Gate Guardian piece, Sang of the Thunder, Kazagen, or Suijin that is banished or in your deck to your hand. So similar banish effect, recover your pieces, and also just to drain your opponent's life points and then power up a Gate Guardian piece. Pretty cool. Up next, we have 3 copies of Fusion Deployment. Similar to Prisma, you reveal a fusion monster in your extra deck, but this time you get to special summon one of those specifically named materials from hand or deck. You get locked into just fusion monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn. You can only activate 1 Fusion Deployment per turn. This one's just awesome. Free material from deck, and all your fusions for the Gate Guardian stuff is all specifically named, so definitely helps out with just getting more on-field materials, especially with stuff like Hero Lives. You want to see those field spells or those pretty much your Gate Guardian pieces. I mean, it's no big deal if they are in the hand, but you typically want them to stay in the deck. You just want to see stuff like Labyrinth Heavy Tank, Shadow Ghoul of the Labyrinth, or stuff like Labyrinth Wall Shadow, just so you can get to your big pieces, keep using your other non-once per turn effects or soft once per turns, and just go into your big plays from there. You'll retrieve a lot of stuff from deck, trust me. Up next, we have 2 copies of Pot of Extravagance, just to get some draw power going. That's why we're also running 3 of everything in the extra deck. Start of your main phase, banish 3 or 6 random face down cards from your extra deck, face down. A bit redundant, but no, I get what they mean. Draw a card for every 3 banished. For the rest of this turn, you can't draw by card effects. So pretty much you'll just randomly banish stuff face down from your extra deck, just so you can get a little bit more draw power. So again, just get into those field spells, get into those heavy tanks, anything to help open up your plays. As mentioned, since we're running Guardian Chimera, we also have Polymerization. Fusion summon a fusion monster from extra deck using monsters from hand or field as material. This is basically for Guardian Chimera, as the other Gate Guardian fusions don't actually use Polymerization. They just banish from the field, spell or trap or monster zone or otherwise. So that's pretty cool. But again, you can honestly just run 1, but I prefer having 2 just so I can go into the Chimera if I need to. Up next, we have Terraforming. Add a field spell from deck to hand. Again, it's a soft once per turn on the Labyrinth Wall Shadow, so I just want to see as many as I can in my opening hand, just so I can keep looping those effects, getting more pieces out onto the field. Moving on to the traps, we have 3 copies of Prey of the YuGiOh. Get to special summon it as a normal monster, a level 5 Earth Insect with 2100 attack, 100 defense, to your main monster zone in its same column. It still treats as a trap. And then you can destroy 1 monster your opponent controls in this card's column. You get to banish it from the graveyard to, similar to the others, add a Gate Guardian piece, Sang of the Thunder, Kazujin, or Sujin, that is banished or in your deck to your hand. It's pretty nice. Mess with your opponent in the same column, banish them from the graveyard to recover your pieces. And then finally, to round out our deck, we have 3 copies of the Solemn Judgment. When a monster would be summoned or a spell or trap card is activated, pay half your life points, negate the summoner activation, and if you do, destroy that card. This way will ensure other of your cards like a Ryoku Guardian that you are always low on life points, so this will just help boost that up, just so your monsters can get a little bit of a boost for your Gate Guardians. But also it's just nice to have an Omnia Gate. This was also reprinted in Maze of Memories, so having 3 copies of Solemn Judgment for a lot cheaper is super helpful as well. Woo! That'll do it for today's deck profile. This was, like I said, kind of an unintentional deck profile, but I'm glad I was able to make and collect all these cards. It's definitely a lot of fun. It's great to make multiple fusions or just go into the big Gate Guardians combined and then just go to town on your opponent with negations, searching spells and traps, getting more fusions out on the field. It's just a lot of fun. So definitely recommend this if you have the capacity and money to spend. It's not too pricey, but I think Guardian Chimera is still a little bit up there if you're not too comfortable with that kind of price. Just focus on the Gate Guardian stuff. They're pretty cheap as well, so definitely give it a shot if you have the capacity to. But that'll do it for today's deck profile. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next time.